In this episode of Maxwell Unplugged, we're joined by two distinguished international arbitrators, Tai and Anna Kirk, who first met at Herbert Smith Freehills in London. Since then, they have each carved out unique paths in their arbitration careers. Tune in as they reflect on their journeys from early milestones to their current roles and share their visions for the future.
I'm Tai, and I'm with
Anna Kirk.
And we wanted to share our story because there's a lot of shared history between the two of us, as well as different paths that we've taken. So maybe I'll let Anna start for the period before we first met.
Thanks, May. Well, as you know, we first met when I arrived at Herbert Smith, probably at the beginning of 2007, I think. So my path to get there was that I qualified in New Zealand. I was one of those, accidental lawyers. I wanted to be a history teacher, but then I thought I'd better do a degree with my history degree that meant a bit more. So I did a law degree. And then, rather ironically, ended up working as a corporate lawyer for a while, doing M&A in New Zealand. But I decided to go overseas, and what I thought I would do, I was always really interested in public international law, but I had this corporate law background. So I decided to go to Cambridge and do my PhD because I wanted to get into research, really look at something. And I did that in business and human rights, which was really just an emerging field at that time. And it was really out of that my interest in arbitration grew. And after I'd done my PhD, I realised I wanted to go back into a firm rather than stay in academia. And I got, just through a colleague from New Zealand, an interview at Herbert Smith with the arbitration team. So I quickly had to brush up on all of my arbitration knowledge. But actually it was for a PSL role, a professional support lawyer at the time, covering maternity leave, you probably remember.
Yes, I do.
And I was probably only in that role for about 2 months before they said, actually, let's pull you over to be a fee earner. But
to the dark side.
To the dark side. But I remember when I arrived, you were probably a couple of years ahead of me as far as PQE went. And you were sort of this awesome Tai that everyone loved. And it was slightly intimidating, but, it was such a great environment to be in. So that's sort of how I arrived there in 2007. But you were already well established by then. So how was it that you came to be in the arbitration team?
Yeah, so for my journey, it was in many ways quite standard, but also, there were interesting bits. I went to university in the UK. I'm Malaysian originally, went to Oxford, then got a training contract with then Herbert Smith in London because they were so well known for disputes, and I definitely wanted to be a disputes lawyer. Did the training contract, I spent a bit of time in Tokyo, and then actually when we met, I had just come back, I think, from secondment in Singapore, where I spent 2005, 2006 as an associate. And I remember coming back and thinking, as a senior associate, and thinking, right, I think it's really important as a group that we get along very well. We work very hard, obviously, as you know, but that, the sort of environment of the group, the camaraderie was very important. So I think the only reason I was very popular at the time was because I would be the one that organized lots of Friday night and other night drinks at Piccolino's.
I remember them well.
Which I think for HSF people will understand, it's the bar literally downstairs from the office, and it became a little bit like the Ally McBeal bar. Now I'm really dating us. Yeah, so those were fun times. And I wanted to add, this was a highlight from one of our first interactions outside of the office, that Anna, myself, and two others, Anne Kosterat and Elika, it wasn't Elika, it was Ruth Byrne. The four of us decided to sign up for the Oxfam 100K walk And we were all associates and senior associates at the time. And we took it very seriously, being girly SWATs. We went and trained.
We did.
I'm doing air quotes, trains every Saturday through rain and sunshine and did it in 2007, I think.
Probably about then. It was one of the best ways to get to know the English countryside, was to do all these random walks through fields of sheep, which as a New Zealander I should probably feel very comfortable with, but it's not something I did a lot of at home.
Yes.
But we did a lot of for that. My biggest memory from that particular thing that we did was that I was in the middle of a massive case at the time, and so we were busy. I think it was Anne Cosserat and I. We were busy working till about midnight or something like that, and we rushed to Victoria to get the last train to Brighton. And then we had to get up at 5 a.m. to go and start this walk, and then walk for 27 hours straight. And I got over the finish line. I just burst into tears. I was so happy but exhausted. It was crazy, but it was certainly a bonding moment, I think, for all of us, as well as the next day where we could hardly walk and we had to all go get a massage.
I know. It was, I think we thought we would finish it and actually go out partying that night, but instead we were all in bed, I think, by 9 p.m. or something like that. And the next day, my big memory from that was I couldn't even get out of the bathtub. My legs wouldn't work. So I thought I lifted my legs, but then fell over and crashed. And I think the rest of you heard it from outside. I thought I had died. Anyway, moving on.
That was fun. And then I remember the following year, and I can't remember if you were involved in this one, we did the 100k bike ride from London to Brighton. So the 100k thing became our thing.
we didn't do anything below 100k. Sadly, I was not involved in that one because, and this moves us on to the next period, I had, by that stage, been seconded to, I think, the Shanghai office in 2009. Where I guess our careers diverged a little bit.
I remember you telling us, we were out to lunch, the sort of a group of associates from Herbert Smith, telling us that you were going to go and feeling so sad that we were losing you because it was so much fun working there with you. But you know, we weren't obviously losing you. You were still with Herbert Smith, but you weren't going to be with us day in, day out from that point on.
Yeah, it was sad. I did really have mixed feelings about going, but obviously it was also a fantastic experience. You know, China was just opening up to arbitration, international arbitration, I should say, because China has been doing domestic arbitration for years and years and has a very developed practice and procedure, and it's very popular there. But international arbitration was still fairly new. And I moved there in 2009 and then very quickly moved to Beijing from Shanghai because that was where all the big state-owned enterprises were, and that was where all the sort of, they were going out of China to do big investments, and therefore that the disputes would come from that. And it was, I was very lucky because, you know, I think we were the first, if not one, at least one of the first, if not the first international law firm to have a dedicated disputes practice in mainland China. So I really saw it from, I guess, ground zero, I suppose. And it was a fascinating time. You know, the Olympics was there, and then the Expo. Yeah, but what happened to you?
Well, I didn't stay too much longer after you left because I had a baby while I was in London, and when my son was about 6 months old, an opportunity came up to move back to New Zealand with my husband's job. So we decided to take that really just for personal and family reasons. All of our families were back in New Zealand, and lifestyle-wise, we thought it would be great to raise our kids there. But like you, I had mixed feelings because I loved being in London. I loved the office and what we were doing. And unlike you, I was going to a jurisdiction where I really couldn't replicate that. And I was quite worried about what I would do because I didn't have any litigation background at all. I didn't really want to go back into M&A. I loved doing the international work that we were doing. So moving to effectively the bottom of the world was something that I did struggle with, albeit I was looking forward to being home. So when I got back to New Zealand after a sort of few months settling in, I decided to, didn't really know what I was going to do. I decided to give David Williams, now Sir David Williams, a call rather randomly. I had had one conversation with him before, because when I was at Herbert Smith, we had appointed him as a arbitrator on a case. So I remember sitting in my office in London about 10 o'clock at night or something like that and giving him a call, because that was a good time, New Zealand time, and he was very nice. So I decided to, I spoke actually with Paula Hodges, and I think she sent David an email just saying, look, I've got this associate who's come back, she might call you. So I plucked up the courage one day and rang him. And the timing, there's a bit of luck involved, as well as partly you make your own luck by just getting out there and doing these things. But the timing, as it turned out, was perfect, because he was in the throes of trying to finish a huge textbook on arbitration, international arbitration, as well as arbitration in New Zealand. It's called Williams and Kawharu on arbitration. And he was struggling to find the time to finish the last few chapters. So seeing my arbitration background as well as my academic background, he said, come and help me finish this book, just part-time work. So it worked out perfectly. And then from there, I, once that was done, moved into being a tribunal secretary for him. And that was really, really valuable as far as my own career journey goes, because I got to work not just with David, but with amazing arbitrators from around the world, and really see how that tribunal side works. And I just learned so much. And it was so complementary to the work I'd done at Herbert Smith, where I'd done that counsel role and then saw the whole process from the tribunal side as well. And David was such a generous supporter of young practitioners. He was really good at training and promoting people and supporting them as they moved up through their journey.
Yeah, because I really want to hear from you on this, because there's sometimes a perception that everything for the lucky few that managed to make a good career out of doing just arbitration. I think there's a perception that things have fallen on our laps, or it's all about being at the right place at the right time. And then other people get very dejected that hasn't happened to them. And you've made it sound a little bit like it was relatively straightforward. But I have had conversations with you before where, it is nerve-wracking to go to somewhere so far away, at least at the time, from a kind of large arbitration center where the careers paths and the role models are sort of well trot out. I think it'd be interesting to get your kind of take on the emotional side, and what did you have any plan B if it wasn't going to work out? If David Williams has told you, oh, thanks for your call, but actually I'm retiring and there's not much happening in New Zealand in arbitration. What were you thinking at the time in terms of how you would make this work? Because it was quite a big move back then.
Yeah, it was. And I was definitely worried, and my plan B was very loose. I think effectively, if it hadn't worked out, I would have gone into one of the large law firms in New Zealand, perhaps the one that I had been at as an M&A lawyer, and tried to get into litigation. But as I say, I was not particularly keen on doing that, only because I didn't have a litigation background. And I really enjoyed the international element of the arbitration work that we did. So I was lucky in a way that it did work out, that David did need someone when I called. But having said that, I think you still have to work hard at it. I got a little a door that opened, but you have to go through that. You have to prove yourself. You have to work hard, and you have to take the opportunities. The door that opened for me wasn't an arbitration job. It was a academic job, effectively, writing book chapters. So I think sometimes you can't plan a path too precisely, or you might miss some of those opportunities that come along where you veer slightly one way and then it takes you on a journey. And I think just being open to different opportunities and to putting yourself out there is really, really important if you are treading a path that's a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then obviously, and for all of us in any path we do, you have to put the work in, you have to put the time in, and you have to do the hard yards.
Yeah.
There's no quick way through any of it. But I do feel lucky because it is difficult to do a full-time arbitration career in some of these jurisdictions that have less arbitration or are not hubs for international arbitration, and I've been able to do that. So I am fortunate too.
I think a good example of that, the sacrifice of what you have to do, that you have to do what it takes to get there is how you got your first appointment. So maybe you can tell that story.
I did. So in 2018, I went out on my own, stopped working for David, although we did a few sort of cases that were ongoing at that point. And I was looking to primarily move into an arbitrator role from there. But as many people will know, it's quite difficult to get your first appointment, and even more so if you're in a jurisdiction that, again, isn't a hub for international arbitration. But I got my first appointment, which was a tiny, tiny case, a few $1,000s. I can't quite remember how much. And I did it completely pro bono. And I got it through the institution in New Zealand, the Arbitrators Institution, who had a very good executive director who was keen to promote young women in arbitration. And she got a call to say, look, we've got this case. It really doesn't warrant paying an arbitrator. Is there anyone who will decide it for us? For free. So she said, I know someone. And that was how I got my first appointment. And it is important because although it was for free, I spent a lot of time on it because you want to do it well. Because that, again, it's that slight foot in the door, taking an opportunity when it comes along. It may not have been the opportunity you dreamed of, but it's still a case. You still got to say, I've done an appointment as an arbitrator, I've put an award out there. And you were still giving that to clients who were, well, at least one of them was legally represented. And then that goes out into the marketplace. And because this is an area where word of mouth is so important, you really have to put the time in and try and build on it from there. But that was how I got my first appointment. But what about your first appointment? What did you do?
Yeah, so being in, I guess even though Shanghai wasn't technically a hub for international arbitration at the time I was there. So I was there 2009, 2010, and then Beijing from 2010 to 2014. We obviously represented a lot of Chinese clients in international arbitration, either in Hong Kong or Singapore or elsewhere. And I got my first appointment through hanging out in places like Maxwell Chambers, doing cases for these clients, but from a counsel perspective. And I always say it's almost by magic that whenever I have a hearing in Singapore or in Hong Kong, within the next couple of weeks, someone approaches me about whether or not, because people talk to each other in the breakout rooms and outside the corridors and all of that. And they're like, oh, I've spotted May Tai. She's here for a hearing, about IP issues or whatever. And, just by osmosis, these things happen. Other tribunals in the other hearing rooms get to hear about it, and they're thinking about a chair or a co-arb on another case or something, and your name comes to their mind. So my first appointment, Simon Chapman and I were here for a case where we were counsel, and fortuitously, we popped by the SIAC to say hello to Kevin and a few others at the time. And they said to us, oh, have you ever considered being on the SIAC's list of arbitrators? And we were both relatively junior at the time. I think this was 2015, if I remember correctly, or maybe earlier, slightly earlier. And we both looked at each other and go, no, I think, being an arbitrator is reserved for people, much older and having more experience than us. And they said, no, we are really keen on, starting and encouraging a new generation of arbitrators. Please consider. So we went back to home at Hong Kong at the time and considered it and said, why not? Got to start somewhere. And then within a few months, I got a first appointment from the SIAC, which is fabulous. And it was, a proper case. It ran all the way, led to, a week's hearing. And which I was very nervous about because it was my first case. And like you, I really wanted to do a very, very good job. And the rest is history. So that led to, sort of more and more cases. And by the time I took the step, which we may get onto later, of transitioning to becoming a full-time arbitrator, I had maybe about 20 cases under my belt. So much more confident and have much more experience with the different things that can happen on cases, and doing that side by side with a counsel practice for sort of the next sort of 10, 15 years has been also very valuable. It really helped me become a better lawyer as counsel. It really gave me a lot of credibility with clients that I was experiencing both and knew quite a lot of the arbitrators in the circuit, having sat with them. So all of that has been very useful.
I would echo that. That's my experience as well, especially talking about how our careers diverged and then have somewhat come back together. I had a similar experience with both ICC and SIAC and getting those first international appointments going once I'd had a few domestic ones. And it's so helpful when those institutions help to give you a little break into the realm of being an arbitrator. And again, you do a good job and then the appointments can flow from there. I think it's so important for the young people, but also in my role now as counsel in international arbitrations, having that arbitrator experience, I think, just like you, really helps me to be a bit better representative for parties when you're in that counsel role, and you know instinctively how a tribunal is going to react to something, particularly on the procedural side, really does help.
Yeah. So many times I say to my associates, please focus on what is on the critical path for the tribunal when they write their award. Do they really need to know about all this procedural skirmish? I know it's like, eating away at you, that you have to get back on the other side because there's been so annoying, but the tribunal doesn't care.
It's so true. It's a great lesson. So now that you are out on your own, tell me, how did that decision come about? And was that quite a scary leap to having come through HSF effectively from training to right at the senior levels at the firm, to now pick a really, really different path is very brave.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that. For me, it's something I have had in my mind that I wanted to do for many years. So I had many years. Those close to me know that I've sort of been counting down for quite a long time now. And of course, there were times when I questioned whether it'd be the right thing to do. As you know, I've only been at HSF and they've treated me so well, and I consider so many people there to be people that are so close to me that I will maintain a relationship with for the rest of my life. And I was also very reassuring that there have been some who have retired before me that I've continued to see very regularly. Not so much in the arbitration world, but people like Sonia Leidecker and Robert Neal, who from the firm. They've always made time for me, and I think that the firm is very special like that. So that helps, because you don't want to be sort of cut off from sort of all the people that you know professionally just overnight. But it's been very smooth, the transition, partly because, as I said earlier, I'd done a bunch of cases as arbitrator already, and so I knew that I would love this type of work. As you also know, being an advocate is super fun and super exciting, and there's just no other type of adrenaline rush that you get in anything else compared to when doing an excellent day's job as an advocate at a hearing. But what I guess, and I miss that, but I guess what people maybe don't remember when you think about that excellent day in court is the 3 years of pain and suffering that you and your team go through leading up to that excellent day when you get vindicated. And to be honest, I don't miss that much.
It's interesting you say that because my path had been rather different. So I'd done the counsel work and then gone on to the tribunal side as tribunal secretary, which I really enjoyed, and then did arbitrator work. And in the last few years, I've come back to doing some counsel work. And at the time I was doing the arbitrator work, I didn't think that I missed the counsel work that much. But now that I've come back to it after quite a long time away, I am loving it. It is so fun. And it's so nice to be part of a team that really pulls together and has that experience together, which was what was so bonding between the two of us back when we were working in London. And sometimes being an arbitrator can be quite lonely, even though if you're on a good 3-member tribunal, it's a great experience. But there is sort of that sacrifice that you give when you're being an arbitrator, that you become very much a little island by yourself. And I wonder if you've given much thought to that.
Yeah, I have, and I think you're absolutely right. That is one of the downsides of just being just doing arbitrator work, which is, I guess how you and I also talk about what we call the non-money earning side of being an arbitrator. We are both involved in a lot of other initiatives. So recently, I've been doing a lot with the ERA Pledge. To try and bring in new, younger women usually, but also men into the arbitration community, make sure they have a bigger network and they're recognized. And sorry, I'm doing a bit of a plug, but in Asia, I think with so many jurisdictions, smaller jurisdictions where arbitration is less of a developed practice, it's so important for these new talents to be brought into the fold with the sort of more experienced practitioners, and to be given the chances that you and I are given because you happen to know someone who can happen to open the door for you slightly. So being involved in these sorts of activities with the various arbitral institutions and the different opportunities that they provide to help, revise rules, to help their diversity initiatives or whatever it might be, gives me, I guess, that sense of community that would be lacking. That is lacking because I don't do the counsel side anymore. Is there any particular one of those kind of initiatives that you're quite fond of?
I agree very much. I mean, I love my work at the moment on the ICC court. That is a great sense of meeting different practitioners around the world, and as a great community, even though we're all scattered, you have a real sense of belonging, fostered very much by the ICC there. I'm also currently a co-chair on the Greener arbitration campaign for the APAC region. So that is fantastic. We're getting that up and running again, and very, very excited about some of the work we'll be doing in the APAC region to promote that. It was such an important cause. So I completely agree with you. And I agree with you too on the importance of those diversity initiatives, because although we've come a long way, and I was thinking about this earlier in the week, recently I had cause to try and put together a list of arbitrators for a case, and we had a particular profile we were after, so that did limit the pool. But I was really struggling still, even in this day and age, to find women that fitted into the profile. And I thought, my goodness, gender diversity is very much the low-hanging fruit, and we now have some great women coming up and through, and I think we're all thrilled that we now have Tai on the list of arbitrators we can appoint. But I was so surprised that after I'd funneled it down because of the particular criteria we were looking at, I had a long list of men and very, very few women that I could find to fill it. So I think we've still got some work to do on that, but also perhaps even more so on the ethnic diversity side, which is still perhaps emerging, particularly in the APAC region. And I know that from my experience at home in New Zealand domestically, we're still trying to very much diversify the arbitrator pool, both by gender and ethnicity, but I think in the wider APAC region as well.
Yeah.
I don't know what your experience with that has been.
Yeah, I mean, like you, it's sort of an issue that I think about a lot. And most recently, I've been thinking a lot about the sort of backlash against diversity. Some more vocal and express, and others, just sort of thinking about it, feeling that something's not right, but not really too scared to articulate it. And, and we've seen sort of court cases and the backlash against universities in the US, for example, where things are perhaps the most sort of outwardly said. And I'm sure inwardly, even if it's not expressed, there are some people, perhaps, the male population, who feel like opportunities all go towards women or the ethnically diverse or younger arbitrators. What about them? And it's an issue that I have thought about a lot, not necessarily in the arbitration space, but as you know, in law firm management, that is something that we have had to deal with for a number of years. And it reminds me of a time in my career in 2015-ish time, when I was the graduate recruitment partner for the Hong Kong office, and we were tasked with recruiting, that it was a target, soft target, not a quota, an equal number of male and female trainees. And at the time when I did graduate recruitment milk runs and gave talks to universities, I would tell them this, and I could see in some faces people getting a bit worried. And I would say, look, to the men and women in the group, if you look at the statistics at the time, not just in Hong Kong, but in most jurisdictions, the number of female graduates was 60-70% from law school versus male graduates who were 30 to 40%. And if you think about law firms still recruiting at around 50-50, the boys, you should be really laughing. There are only 30-40% of you going into 50% of the roles. It's still a very privileged place to be. And you could see them all like relax a bit more and agree and smile a bit more. But at the same time, what, I didn't say at the time, but which was the reality, is this compares to maybe, well, that was 2015, but in 2005, let's say, there were way more male trainees than female trainees. So then the number has changed and gone down for men. But at the same time, you couldn't say that wasn't fair to be at the sort of 50-50 mark, give or take. And I think that's just what we need to accept in arbitration. I think it's not going to be necessarily better always for a particular cohort, but you've got to see the wider picture and see if what the initiatives that they're trying that are on foot and what they're trying to achieve is fair and sustainable and the sort of right direction to be taken into the future. because I agree with you, Anna. If in New Zealand, 70% of the graduates in law school are women, like everywhere else, and when you come 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line to appoint an arbitrator and you've still got a short list, which is sort of 8 men and 2 women, something's gone wrong there. There's something that needs looking at, and it can't be fixed overnight, but it's definitely something that we keep to need sort of pushing out.
I agree with you on that. I think you can see amazing progress in this particular area over the past 10 to 15 years, huge progress. But the work isn't done yet. It's not a time to rest on our laurels. That there's still bringing that cohort right through to the end. And I hope that having people like you out there to be appointed as arbitrator will help shift that dial and more of you as we go through. It's such an important role, and you see how very, very able all of these female arbitrators coming through are, of course, and it makes a huge difference, I think, to the overall balance of the profession, which is very important. It's what we're after in the end, is balance. And I guess it brings me back in my mind to thinking back to those Herbert Smith days that we started talking about, where we had that fabulous group of associates there, many of whom were women. We were probably more women than men at that time as our associates. And not all have continued in arbitration. Some have gone off and done other things, but it was such a wonderful group, so collegial, so fun. And you think, gosh, if we could all have that experience and bring that through our careers into the senior levels, it would be such a wonderful profession.
Yes, completely agree. And on that note,
shall we leave it there?
Yes, we should probably wrap up. Many thanks to Maxwell Chambers for letting us share our experience.
And reminisce.
Yes.